Good morning, everybody. I'm Joseph Thought. Today is October the 16th, I believe. Uh, yep, October 16th, 2022. We're getting so close to Halloween. Okay. Well, all right. So we have a new Chris Watts interview. And look, I'm not interested in going back and revisiting any of the old personality uh, issues or domestic disagreements or arguments. I'm really more interested in the reality of what in the world was Nicole Kessinger up to and what really happened, right? Those are my um, main issues. So there were a couple things that came out of this interview that were of high interest to me. Um, and these were from the points made were exactly in line with the points made years ago when this was all happening. Okay. In fact, one particularly irritating troll kind of laughed and told her channel, that what I was suggesting was just ludicrous and made no sense. And I laughed at her and said, "Oh, you troublesome little troll. We're talking about the head, the department chair of the engineering department at LSU. This is about as big of a guy in the oil and gas engineering, petroleum engineering as there is. LSU is the premier university for that sort of training, and this guy is the department head. He's sitting at the top of the throne. So, of all the people working at Anadarko, all the people working at any oil company, whether it's gas production, whatever, this is the guy training everyone else how to do the job. He knows, he gets it, right? So, and I come from a family that is just nothing but engineers, and specifically petroleum engineers in many cases. um, my dad invented a special drill bit that would allow um, drilling in permafrost. And look, I'm not just talking off the top of my head, okay? So I made these points in the beginning when all this came out. I made these points and I referenced the head of the engineering department, who has a doctorate degree in petroleum engineering, that he did an interview. And at the time that the Chris Watts story was being told, and he came out and he just smiled at the lady doing the interview, and he just said, I don't know what happened. I don't know how the children ended up in the oil tanks, the holding tanks, but I know they didn't go through the thief hatches. Now that's his word. That's his exact words. I don't know how much clearer you can get than that. And the people that were a little more sensitive in how they talked about the details, they all stood firm, that the reality is there's no way. And I did. So if I were to go back and pull the old videos out, I actually showed the circumference of an average 3-year-old and an average 4-year-old and average 5-year-old, their circumference of their skull. And the skull would have been the largest uh, immovable body part to have to go through the tube. And what a lot of people don't realize even today is that with the thief hatch, you've got an 8-inch open. In this particular case, had an 8-inch, or not, was it an 8-inch opening or a 9-inch? I don't remember now. I'll have to go back and look. But either an 8-inch or 9-inch opening. But it's not simply a hole. And this is what I kept trying to impress on everyone. It's not a hole. There is actually a tube that runs, like if you open up the top of the thief hatch, you're looking at what looks to be a hole. But if you were to stick your arm down into that hole, you would feel that your hand would actually be in a tube, like an 8-inch tube. And the tubes can range in length. They can be 10 inches up to 36 inches, depending upon the size of the holding tank, the type of oil that you're holding, how much poisonous gas is being, how are they routing poisonous gas off the top? It's highly complicated. They're not just out there holding water in a tank, right? It's a complicated process, but nevertheless, the thief hatches are there to stop people from being able to steal the oil. I mean, that's the whole point and purpose of it. That's why it's called a thief hatch. It's there so that they can have access to the tank for testing, and they take a little sensor, and it's on this long, not a string, but like a I don't know what it's called. I guess it's a metal string with plastic that's wrapped around it that they drop their sensor down into, and they get their readings, and then they pull it back up. Now, the movement of these tanks was electronic. Okay. They could move oil back and forth between the two tanks, and in addition to the open air holding tank, they could move that back and forth. Okay. And it was all done electronically. You would tell it how much you wanted to move and when. The time to move it was very little, with hours at the most, but 4 hours, you could empty one into the other tank. And with the description, I think that we were provided, weren't we told that on one tank there was like 2 feet and the other tank was like half full, maybe something like that? They were kind of uneven. And so the people in my family that are petroleum engineers, well, there's also a civil engineer, they believe that he or someone was trying to set up a flash explosion, which would have been far more devastating and destructive than a simple ignition, right? A flash explosion is a whole, you actually get multiple explosions, successive explosions, and there's nothing left, by the time it's over. So anyway, so the head of LSU engineering, who got a doctorate degree in petroleum engineer himself, they are LSU being the prominent petroleum engineering training university. He told interviewers when the kids were first discovered and this was all playing out, he said to them, he doesn't know how the kids got into the tank, but they did not go in through the thief hatch. They would have been pulverized. There would have been crushed bone. They would not have been able to do it. And the autopsy did not indicate any sort of total body destruction. There were some scratches on Bella's hip, I think, or her rib cage, but nothing more. And then the lip, problem. So the reality is, it was far, 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 far far more likely that the access panel, the service panels, the service panels sit at ground level. They're about 7 inches to 10 inches up off the ground. It creates a little bit of a lip that you have to step over into for any residual oil or water that's left at the base after you've drained out your tank. It is far more likely that someone went in there and transferred the oil from one tank to the other, removed the hatch, put a body in, closed it, transferred oil back over to the other side, removed the hatch, put the body in, and closed the hatch, and then tried to normalize. And like I said, for the engineers in my family, it was a particular note that they felt like, because the array of oil did not make sense to them, that the oil should have filled up one tank before moving and beginning to fill the secondary tank. And the way that it was sitting was very dangerous, because it would prompt, you would have too much of it, you would have too much built up gas in both tanks, which would set up that cataclysmic flash explosion that Anadarko had previously had several years before, that prompted a huge, lawsuit. So at the time, with my little 1,500 person channel, I was made fun of, and the main troll was, oh, it's so ridiculous. It's so stupid. Okay, but maybe not, right? Okay. So and I didn't put up a fuss, because I don't, but it just shows how, ridiculous she is. So let's listen to the pertinent parts of this interview. And then obviously, I'm only just a couple of little clips here. And this is, you can go to Dave's channel, Seeking the Truth with Dave. He's got quite a lengthy conversation with Ronnie and Cindy Watts, and he's got other videos with them. Apparently, I had no idea about this, but apparently he has made good friends with Ronnie and Cindy Watts, which I was not aware of. And so you might just want to go over there and just listen to all of the stuff that he's got. But I just want to stay focused on the pertinent parts of this. From my perspective, the things that were consistent with my previous conversation about this case.
I can't remember that 111-minute phone call.
Okay, so now I thought I had moved it forward. My sound is way low too. Let me turn this up. Okay, so the first thing, what this is, I thought I had moved it forward, but she's just, Cindy is saying that Chris says he doesn't remember the 111-minute phone call that happened that night. If you go back and listen to my Chris Watts videos, I made the contention that the girls were put in before Shanann arrived home. They went out, they moved the oil around, they put the bodies in, and then Shanann was late. Her flight was late. And so Shanann had a different disposal method. It was pressured, and, they didn't get to do the explosion. Perhaps pure speculation on my part. I own it. This is my idea only. All right.
I cannot remember that 111-minute phone call.
You asked about that 100 times.
If you think that we haven't asked him every question there is to ask, you're wrong. We have asked him everything. And we're getting nothing.
Gotcha.
I think one of the things that's terrifying to me when I go back and I listen to this and I remember everything, the idea that they were not able to talk to him, that's scary, right? You think about if it's your family, somebody your friend, someone you love finds themselves in this situation and people are keeping you away from him. Very strange, right? I was thinking, and I don't have time today to do it. It'll have to be later on tonight. But I'm going to go back and listen to the prison interview again because I couldn't remember, but it seemed like to me, didn't Chris say that he told them he did not want to talk to them? Is that what? But maybe I dreamed that. But anyway, I don't know. It just seemed they were really disturbed that they couldn't speak to him before the whole plea deal. But I thought he said, but I could be wrong about that.
Ronnie, no, the love.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
They are
I
being
Okay.
said
shown
that
in
was looking
chat.
at. You're good.
Put your glasses on, Ronnie. Right.
Well, he does have them on.
Okay,
They-
come
The
on,
love.
come on,
Did
come
you
on.
remember that question I asked Chris when I showed him an example of an 8-inch plate and put
Yes.
my hand across it and showed it to him on the Zoom that we had? And I said, Chris, you tell me that Bella and Cece would fit through these, fit in that diameter? He said, well, if not, I guess they went to side hatches. I said, that tells me you don't know how in the hell they got in. Oh,
Boom. There you go. So Ronnie shows Chris an 8-inch plate, puts his hand on top of it, which his hand is going to be bigger than that 8-inch plate. And he says, are you going to tell me that Bella and Cece could go through this? And again, go back to my old video. I showed the circumference of a 3-year-old, an average 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. I showed the circumference of their head, and the skull is like egg shaped. It's not perfectly round like a ball. But that 8-inch circumference, that's a circle. You can't put an 8-inch peg through an 8-inch round hole. It doesn't fit. So all the other bones, even the shoulder blades, they're reticulated so that they'll move, right, to accommodate possibly. But there is zero chance that you are going to get an average skull of a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. They're not going to go through an 8-inch tube. They're not. And so Chris says now to Ronnie, this is new information coming out. He said he's challenging Chris, and he's saying, are you telling me that they went through this hole? And Chris says, I don't know. Maybe they went through the side panel, the service hatch. Well, that's what the head of the petroleum department at LSU thought. So I don't remember how this ends. Let's listen a bit more.
tank, see.
That's right. He doesn't know. Like it's quite simply, he said, like, and you actually very recently threw the exact same question at him in person.
Yep.
And he still doesn't know how the children got in the tank.
Nope. Nope, you can't answer that question.
He cannot answer that question.
But I also brought up the water tank also. I asked him, remember I asked him how long it took to drain it down and fill it back up? As far as the oil and oil tanks, how much oil was in them, how long it would take to drain them, put it back in?
No more than 4 hours.
I'm not going to put it on the screen, right?
Okay. All right. Now, so, and this is I believe it's Seeking the Truth with Dave. That's the channel. Copy. Save. Okay, here's copy. I'll put this in the where are y'all at? Oh my gosh. I've got so many open tabs here, y'all. Where are I can't find y'all. Hold on. Where'd he go? Not you. Not you. Not you. Ghislaine Maxwell feels sad for her friend Andrew. There y'all are. Okay, I found you. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's a link to the channel, and you can see you'll be able to see the interview, and then there are apparently there are also other videos with the Watts. I haven't watched them, but they're there apparently. Okay, so this is pretty big news, and here's the reason why I made the decision to go ahead and to talk about this. Because here we are 4 years later, and now it's still exactly what I was saying in the beginning of this. It's exactly what I was saying. It's not, if you consider the condition of the bodies, it's not even remotely possible that they went through that 8-inch tube. It's just not possible. Now, had their bodies been pulverized, then okay. But no, not and here's the reason why this is so important. Because he would have had to have had some help. He would have needed help if they were moving oil back and forth and put it, if this was it. I know that Chris was, intelligent. I know that, but he wasn't intelligent enough to set up a flash explosion. He didn't know that much about the chemistry. So somebody related to safety, one of the engineers, somebody would have needed to be there that was either intricately or intimately familiar with the safety report that was released on the earlier explosion to know how to set it up and then hope for the best. So he very likely would have had the training and the ability to transfer the oil from tank to tank, but you would have had an accountability problem. So the company would have been able to access those records and say, hold on, they were out there moving oil around. Why were they doing this? And so it's one of two things. Either that was part of the information that was covered up in agreement for this plea deal. Because remember, there was some information that they agreed to keep secret, to destroy, if he agreed to this plea deal. And everybody thought, wow, that's kind of crazy that, he didn't really get much of a deal. What was his deal? Have y'all ever stopped to think about that? What did he actually win in his plea deal? They don't put people to death in Colorado. It's done. So how did he help himself? The only way he helped himself was to be spared the shame of the trial, to be spared the shame of the details coming out. Basically, he's a coward. He ran away to hide. Does that sound, a man that would rather hide, live in a prison for the rest of his life to be spared the public humiliation of the truth coming out? Does that strike you as a guy that would have the ability to plan and execute the death of his wife and little babies all on his own? I don't think so. I have said from the beginning of this, I believe it in my soul someone else was involved. I think he did it. Please don't get me wrong. I am 100% convinced he absolutely was a 100% participant in changing his life. I think he was pursuing a new life. I think he wanted a different way of life. And I think he's a psychopath. And I think he didn't have any sort of guilt about what he did. But I don't think he had the technical skills and the ability to manage it on his own. I don't believe that. And, you know, it's interesting that they're draining the tank, or not draining, but the water truck is there, you know, that day transporting oil and whatnot. There's a lot about it. It's hard to. Here's another thing that I have a hard time reconciling. I have a hard time reconciling how a guy goes to that kind of night, right? And spends the sunrise disposing of his family, and then simply goes over to the work location and is no different. None of the people there look at him and go, "Damn, you look like you've been rode hard and put up wet." They all said he was calm, he was normal, he was, you know. So he wasn't even tired. Like, let's say he isn't truly a psychopath, like I think. Let's say he doesn't have any emotional response to the nightmare. It was just a regular, you know, like no different than, you know, putting up a new bed, taking out, throwing away the old bed. No emotional kind of distress. Wouldn't he at least be tired? Wouldn't he at least have been exhausted out of his mind? Wouldn't that have shown up? Because if you say, "Oh, but he was running on adrenaline," don't you understand? Well, if he's running on adrenaline, then that walks back the claim of him being psychopath. And then if he's running on adrenaline, then you would have had to have seen the emotional distress. So you can't have it both ways. So what's happening during the 111-minute phone call? Who is he on the phone call with? And there's apparently GPS data. He had two phones. He had his work phone, his personal phone. He had two phones, and the phones were in two different locations at any given time. How do you have that happen? If he's got his phones with him, how is it possible that you have one phone somewhere and another phone somewhere else? So I want to be very clear, because there'll be those trolls that will, you know, say that I'm supporting Chris Watts, which is ludicrous. No, I'm not supporting Chris Watts, not on any level at all. He did it 100%. He did it. He was fully invested. But I continue to believe someone else was involved in this. I believe it wholeheartedly. I believe it. And I think it is very interesting that that Ronnie holds up an 8-inch plate and says to Chris, "You're going to tell me that the girls were able to go through this hole?" And he says, "I don't know, maybe they went through the service hatch." The department head of LSU engineering department said in a national interview he doesn't know how the girls got into the tanks, but they did not go through the thief hatch. That's good enough for me. So something happened. Someone else was involved. And I don't know what you do about it at this point, 4 years down the road. I am of the belief, I will say this, this Taylor Parker story, the young lady in Northeast Texas / Oklahoma, who basically, I'm putting together a video on her now because she apparently had a lot of mental health problems, but it's one of those cases where, and I've warned about this often with these parents that don't want to let their children take responsibility for their bad behavior. If you raise your child in a way that every time they make a mistake, every time they do something wrong and they're about to pay the consequences for their bad behavior, if you're the parent that rushes in and rescues them, if you're the parent that rushes in and always protects them, teaches them how to lie, teaches them how to avoid responsibility, that is how you set somebody up to basically become a Dahmer. As these criminals graduate to bigger and more heinous crimes, and each step they're insulated from consequences, they become more empowered and emboldened. They get more audacious in the crime they commit or the circumstances under which they do the crime. Hi, Doc. Could you say that about the hatch again? I didn't get it. I will, Dr. Latina, and welcome. Good morning. It's good to see you. And so this is one of the reasons why it's critical when our child makes a mistake and the school is about to punish them, or they're about to have to work 2 jobs instead of 1 to pay off their debt. It's a good parenting response to let your child experience those consequences, because it dampens the possibility of them increasing their antisocial behavior in the future. But if you're constantly insulating them from the corrective consequences, then they learn to act with impunity. And I think that is what Taylor Parker did. I think she spent a lifetime lying, manipulating, and people ran in, her parents, her family ran in to protect her from her lies at every step. And so she became more audacious each step she took. Okay, so Dr. Latina, so the hatch, okay, so the holding tanks for the oil, there is a service hatch at the bottom of the tank. There's usually about a 6 to 10 inch lip at the bottom, so that if you take the hatch off of the service tank of the manway, you take the hatch off, and the hatch is about 3 or 4 feet tall, maybe I think 42 inches. I'm going by memory, and it's 4 years ago. I knew all this because I asked the petroleum engineers in my family. But so there, it's held together with lug nuts on all 4 sides. There's about an 8 to 10 inch lip at the bottom. You have to step over into it because the tanks will have like residual oil or water on the floor level of the tank after all the oil has been transferred from one tank into another tank. And the reason that you have a manway, that you have access to have personnel go into these tanks, is for cleaning or to service the tank. You've got electronics that are a part of the tank. You've got piping that's moving oil from one tank to another tank or into, a truck. So these are not just vessels, discrete vessels sitting out in the middle of nowhere, like a bowl holding water. They're machinery that are process oriented. So there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of electronics. There's mechanical parts. There are valves that can be manually opened and closed in terms of safety. Like if you have an explosion, you've got to be able to shut the gas off to whatever is on fire. So there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, it's a structure that's been built. It's intricate. So it's ludicrous to believe that you got a couple of oversized Coke cans sitting out there holding petroleum. That's just stupid. These are mechanical in nature. They're electrical, and they have to be able to have access to the inside of these tanks. And to have that, they can remove these panels that sit about 8 to 10 inches off the floor. And it's done by, just like you would take off a race car wheel. You just open the lug nuts. The lug nuts go all 4 sides around. You just zoom, 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 zoom. And then you remove the panel. And then the personnel put on their protective gear and they have to wear respirators, all that. And then they can gain access to repair. Some of these tanks, I would think, because this is Colorado, in fact, I guess it's a certainty that there's probably heaters in those tanks, because oil gets very thick and not a complete solid state, but it can become immovable when it's cold, depending on what the set point is. In Egypt, I mean, this is crazy, but it's the real deal. In Egypt, when they are moving certain types of oil, the tanks have open flames at the bottom to keep the oil warm and fluid. It's fairly horrifying, right? But it's true. Yeah, God's honest truth. In 2022, right now, today, there are tankers with crude oil running around the streets with open flames underneath them. So these tanks probably had heaters in them to keep the oil fluid so that it could be easily moved, right? And so the hatches, Dr. Latina, are for this particular battery. The thief hatches had an 8-inch opening, okay, 8-inch circumference, right? But what many people don't understand is that it's not simply an opening at the top of the tank. It's actually a tube, and the tubes can be different lengths. There's some standard lengths. I don't remember now. I'll go back and pull those videos, and I don't remember, but maybe 12 inches was one, 4 inches, 12 inches, and maybe 31 inches. So if you were to stand at the thief hatch, Dr. Latina, you would be looking at an 8-inch hole. When you open the lid, you would look at an 8-inch opening. When you would stick your hand down in it, you wouldn't be able to move your hand around because it was now inside the tank. You would stick your arm down in it and you would just feel the sides of an 8-inch tube that could be as long as 30 inches. And so they're asking us to believe that these children were able to go through these 8-inch circumference tubes that could have been 4 inches, 10 inches, 30 inches, all the way through these tubes with no broken bones and only a small scratch on Bella's rib cage or something. I don't remember. So I went and I looked at the time, the circumference of an average 3-year-old and 4-year-old, 4-year-old, and 5-year-old. The average circumference of the skull, which of course, as you know, is more of an oblong egg shape than actual circle like the tube would be. And you simply would not be able to put the skull of an average 3-year-old. It simply just would not physically be able to go through that 8-inch tube. It just couldn't be. It's not physically, it's just simply not possible, right? Well, apparently, and of course, I wouldn't know this because I don't know anything about these people, this family, but apparently Ronnie asked Chris at some point, they were on a Zoom call. He holds up this 8-inch plate and he says, "Hey, are you telling me that Bella and Cece went through a plate this wide? Is that what you're telling me?" He put his hand over the plate so Chris could see it. And Chris's response in this interview was, "I don't know. Maybe they went through the manhatch or the manway." That was my contention in the very beginning, Dr. Latina. When all of this played out, I said, I don't believe they went through the thief hatch. That's not possible. I believe that in those hours where they supposedly went to 2 restaurants, the exact same restaurant, but 2 different locations. They supposedly went to 2 restaurants. They supposedly have a 111-minute phone call. That whole evening was so upside down and backwards after the whole, birthday party thing. The whole thing was upside down, backwards, made 0 sense. I was of the opinion that Bella and Cece were already in the tanks before Shanann ever got home. That's what I believe. And I believe that 100% Chris was a part of it, knowingly and willingly. He absolutely wanted a new life. He wanted out from underneath her. He wanted money. I believe that in my heart and soul. But I don't believe, not for a minute, that he acted alone. The story that we were told just can't be true. The facts of the equipment itself, it just can't have happened that way. And when you've got petroleum engineers, people, one of these engineers actually builds and designs these facilities. We've got multiple engineers that, it's their job to drill and get oil out of the ground and into those tanks, right? When you've got that many people, the head of the LSU engineering department, who is himself a PhD in petroleum engineer, these are the guys that design this equipment. And when they are telling me that just didn't happen, like, I don't know why they're saying that, but that did not happen. They all agreed. So the overriding consensus, and this was among 4 petroleum engineers and 1 civil engineer between the ages of 38 and 84, was if in fact the kids were found in the tanks, they had to have been put there through the manway. There's no way. They had to have removed the service panel, place them in the tank, and then re-secured the opening and then move the oil back in. And they said the array of the oil did not make any sense. That one tank would be half full, the other tank would only have 2 feet or 10 inches or something. That was a very dangerous situation that they would not have ever allowed to happen, because it allowed for too much buildup of gas. And that's that. So I felt like this interview was a incredibly important point here, that Chris says, I don't know, maybe they went through the manway. Chris, what? Maybe they went through the hatch? What are you talking about? You're the one that told the court that you put them into the 8-inch tube. You said that. Now you're saying maybe they went through the manway? You kind of talk like a man that wasn't even there. All right. Now that's that. Okay. Okay. So here is once again, here's the link to the channel. There is the full interview with Ronnie and Cindy Watts, and it just happened a day or two ago. And then Dave has obviously made good friends with them because he traveled. Dave lives in Australia, and he traveled to North Carolina to actually spend time with Ronnie and Cindy Watts. So they got a lot of videos together on his channel. Yeah, I think Jim did not get the proper attention. I think Jim should have been, he absolutely should have been investigated. And I believe in my heart of hearts that Nicole Kessinger, you got a good ping that morning, 15 minutes after Chris drove away. She's pinging in right there in town. She remember the garage door notifications that it's opening, closing, and he's already gone. Who did it? Who opened and closed it? Well, I think it was her leaving. I think she got in the car and she called Jim. And that's why the phone pinged on the tower. I think you have to be sort of foolishly blind to believe the story that Rourke gave us. But I don't know. Because we say that the facts of what we know really don't match with the official storyline. Because you're intelligent and you have the ability to say, yeah, that's just not likely. Like, that's illogical. And you can try to shame me and make fun of me, but I'm an intelligent human being and I know facts when I see them. I know what an 8-inch tube looks like. I know what the average circumference of a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old skull is. I know what the autopsy said. Those two kids did not go through that pipe. That just simply didn't happen. But there is another access way that was absolutely doable. The oil is moved electronically. 100% they could have pulled it off, and only, I think if I go back and listen to that video, I think we had it narrowed down to I think my brother did, I think within like 3 hours and 45 minutes, they could have moved the oil enough to get the bodies into both tanks. Well, obviously, him using a strong guesstimate on the amount of oil, knowing the exact tanks, the estimate of how much oil would have been there, and then knowing the equipment for how quickly they could transfer that oil back and forth. And he felt like it could have been done in about 3.5, 4 hours. Kind of gives you a different perspective on it, doesn't it? It kind of makes it kind of makes you stop and think, wow, there was a lot of something strange went on that night with the whole restaurant, going to 2 of the same restaurant. Some unusual things that happened that night. So I think the girls were gone. I think they were already gone. All right. Okay. I hope you guys will go and listen to the whole interview. And of course, we can all prepare for incoming. You know what's going to happen. This is going to trigger a lot of the virtuous, self-righteous, right? We know that will happen. It was I believe 100%. It was completely premeditated, Dr. Latina. Yeah. And listen, Dr. Latina. So that morning, the kids have been disposed of. Watts is at work. He has not yet gotten the phone call from Nikki that Shanann is not answering the door. He's looking at new Audis. He's looking to buy a new Audi. No, he wanted out of the money crunch. He was tired of the debt. I believe he's a psychopath, And I think he looked at this as a new lease that he could get out from underneath all of the responsibility, all of the debt, and he could turn it around and have a new life with money. He had more than $300,000 worth of insurance on his wife and his 2 children. He had introduced Nicole Kessinger, his mistress, to Shanann July the 4th before all this happened. She was actively Googling Shanann a year before this happened. Yes, it was planned. I believe it in my heart. And this affair did not last 30 days. This affair was going on for months. I believe it in my heart and soul. All right. You guys have a wonderful day. Y'all are awesome. I will return. And y'all prepare for incoming, because the self-righteous, they're going to be out virtue signaling and caterwauling and screeching like you never heard before. Y'all have a good day. Bye.